Amidst a COVID surge in the wake of Hurricane Ida, New Orleans loses power. We will get a live report from Dr. Unconfined Gallery in New Orleans. Infectious disease physician and epidemiologist at Access host of the Daily Noise Center podcast. Also on the program today, U.S. nears peak COVID hospitalizations as the EU restricts U.S. travelers again. Florida court quashed Governor DeSantis' mask mandate ban allows schools to impose mask mandates. Meanwhile, U.S. strikes ISIS in Afghanistan, reportedly killing at least 9 civilians, 6 of whom were children. The Afghan evacuation flights continue. Over 240,000 Afghans have been evacuated to 11 other countries. Meanwhile, Democrats scramble to revive the eviction moratorium, but it's too little too late. Could impact up to 4 million tenants within 2 months. Also, we are a week out from up to 8 million people losing unemployment insurance. Providers and insurers line up to fight the Democratic Medicare expansion. In the wake of the Remain in Mexico and eviction moratorium rulings, the Supreme Court's shadow docket is a little more scrutiny. Sirhan, convicted of killing Robert F. Kennedy, granted the first phase of parole. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. I'm back from vacation. Emma Wrigley did a great job in my absence. Thank you, Emma.
You're welcome, Sam.
I also picked up this habit of talking in a staccato cadence, which, of course,
Where did you learn that?
I just picked it up on vacation.
Yeah. Well, did you learn under some can yet?
Do I need to?
Speaks for itself.
Yeah, had a little time on the beach. Got some rest. Well, had the kids. So it wasn't exactly the most restful thing, but it was enjoyable. We had fun. Back at it, and to a lot of really disturbing news, not the least of which is happening down in New Orleans. And we will be talking to Dr. Unconfined Gallery in a few moments, who at this point, I think he is in either the City Hall or in the Convention Center. And we're still dealing with basically a citywide power outage and an inability to evacuate patients in these hospitals there. We will talk more with him in a moment. Meanwhile, the evacuation continues in Afghanistan. I mentioned 240,000 people have been, Afghans have been evacuated to 11 different countries. We are, the United States, continuing our evacuation flights at least until tomorrow. Supposedly, we are going to wrap it up then. And of course, there are, it's hard to sort of get a sense of whether there are people who think it's possible that we could stay in Afghanistan, or that there is people, there are warmongers out there who are trying to punish and make an example and set a precedent. You can't pull out of a 20-year war.
And they're not mutually exclusive.
And they're not mutually exclusive. Sort of a twofer. Here is, let's just look at some of this. It's upsetting. But frankly, this has been going on for 20 years. And we talk about the reports of what's going to happen, particularly in regards to women, but broadly speaking, Afghan citizens in Kabul uh, under Taliban rule. Very often, we get very little reports of Afghans living in rural areas who have been suffering through 20 years of, well, and prior to that, civil war, but 20 years of a war between Americans and the Taliban, and have been, and as well as all of the other sort of militia groups in Afghanistan, and the periodic drone strikes, bombings that end up killing civilians. And this weekend, there was a reminder of that that we don't generally see, because this one was in Kabul and it got a little bit more attention. Um, Not necessarily confirmed by any outside agencies, although it's being widely reported that a strike in Kabul killed at least 9 civilians, 6 of whom were children. Here is some footage of the funeral that took place in the wake of that drone strike, ostensibly to head off a suicide bomber, an ISIS suicide bomber.
It's unclear, so we're being careful about make sure that this one strike talks about it is not massive like the war. And yeah, it's a really
That is a video comes from Nita Julius. He is a staff foreign correspondent in the Middle East for the Los Angeles Times. And so, corrected, it was 10 civilians and 7 children.
Well, it's conflicting reports. I've been watching closely reporting, and I think what we read was, it's not exactly clear at this point, but multiple children.
And this has been the dynamic, except for minus the attention that has been going on for over, for decades. And sometimes
Yeah. I mean, is this not just a crystallization of the entire war on terror, right? There was a suicide bomber at the Kabul airport by ISIS-K. A number of U.S. officials, including H.R. McMaster, try to say, well, maybe ISIS-K is working with the Taliban because there are rivals, so there's that desire to connect these two rival groups and say they're working together, and then we respond with a drone strike that then kills more civilians. Like, that is the entire war on terror encapsulated into a series of chain events and reactions that happen within this.
It's fascinating too to hear that ISIS-K working with the Taliban, they're rivals, but it's also exactly what we heard that justified the invasion of Iraq. That Al Qaeda, which there was connection between Al Qaeda and Iran, although also rivals. Al Qaeda and Saddam Hussein also rivals, and we just get sucked deeper into this, and civilians who pay the price. Here is Chris Murphy on with Just Coucher on CNN, and again, there is a lot of reporting that comes out of Korea, but very little that comes out from the rest of the country, where people were just literally dying for the strikes to end. But here is Chris Murphy on the take now.
what happens to the women and girls of Afghanistan? There are already anecdotal reports of Taliban fighters grabbing 14-year-old girls and I mean, I would call it a forced marriage, but it's not marriage. It's forced rape and slavery. And what happened to you? Part of the reason why we were there for 20 years, right? We were in the business of trying to stand up an Afghan government that would be able to protect those girls. And in the end, the Afghan government and the security forces decided not to fight for them. The question is, should we have stayed there forever in order to protect those advances in part of the country? When the Taliban, by the time 2021 rolled around, already controlled more than half of the country. It's a tough question, but I think if you ask my constituents, they were not necessarily willing to sacrifice another 20 years of American blood and treasure as to the question of who controls Afghanistan. I know it's a really hard conversation, but there are really awful despotic regimes all around the world. And the United States does not make the decision to send our troops into every single one when we have an issue with the human rights decisions of a particular foreign often there are allies. Senator.
Well, there you go.
I mean, exactly the point.
You gotta stumble onto that one.
Right. I mean, that was, I think I understand why a U.S. politician sort of uses the lens and the perspective of exclusively of his constituents and the treasure and what that we still advise, and sort of only implies that there's also a price that is paid by civilians around the country. But at the very least, that's a fairly nuanced conversation. And ended on the right note, it seems to me, where it's very hard to make a moral argument for continuing our occupation there after 20 years. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment, and we'll be speaking to Mark Elaine Gary in just a minute. Folks, we got two sponsors. Just going to we'll change course here for a moment. Two sponsors for today's program. One is a site that I've used many times, givewell.org. Many people, particularly towards the end of the year, but particularly amongst times like these, are looking for a good charity to give to. GiveWell.org has helped over 50,000 donors find places where their donations can save or improve their lives the most. GiveWell has recommended charities that have rigorous academic independent studies of the cost effectiveness of their programs. Here's how it works. GiveWell dedicates over 20,000 hours a year to researching charitable organizations to handpick a few of the highest impact evidence-based charities. Over 50,000 donors have used GiveWell. They've donated more than $750 million. These donations saved over 75,000 lives and improved the lives of millions. And here's the best part. GiveWell is free. GiveWell doesn't take a cut of your donation. They allocate your tax-deductible donation to the charity you choose. Plus, they publish all of their research on their site for free. I found Give directly through GiveWell. It is, the studies have shown giving directly to people who need money is the best way to get them out of poverty and extreme poverty. But there are other charities there that give directly, which I don't think has any relationship with GiveWell other than the similarity in the name. Account together, you can find other charities, the ratings on charities, and if you've never donated to GiveWell's recommended charities before, you can have your donation matched up to $1,000. You do so before the end of August, or as long as the matching funds last. So we have 1 or 2 days left to head over there. Claim your match, go to givewell.org and click podcast at the majority report and in the majority report at checkout. That's givewell.org, click podcast and the majority report at checkout. I'm sure they know you heard about GiveWell from the majority report to get your donation matched up to $1,000. That's 2 days, so go check it out and double your income. Also, today's sponsor, they are dressing me very well. I've got a sweater right over there on the couch right now. It's not exactly sweater weather, but I got ahead of it.
Breaking news, Sam does not dress himself.
Well, I do my best. If this season you can let Stitch Fix do all the hard work, like I have. Stitch Fix offers clothing hand-selected by expert stylists in your unique size, style, and budget. Every piece is chosen for your fit and your life so you can look and feel the best. Here's the way it works. They send you try the pieces on at home before you buy. You keep what you love and return what you don't. Stitch Fix has free shipping and easy returns or exchanges. Prepaid return envelope is included. For the story, the two shirts I got over the summer, I can't remember the name, but one was a sort of polo style gray one. I thought that was the one that I was, even my stretch, my reach shirt was that blue one, that button down short sleeve shirt. Yes, I got the one keeping the blue one. So I expanded my sartorial repertoire, and it was an easy return on the folio. There's no subscription required. You just pay $20 for a style feature box, which gets credited towards pieces you keep. There are no hidden fees ever. Which Fix has styles and clothing to fit any occasion, women, men, and kids. They ship all over the U.S. and available in the UK as well. And I got right over there a baseball style. That's what I call it. Yeah. Cardigan sweater, zip up. And folks are going to see that once the weather turns. But I want to get in there early. It started today at StitchFix.com. They know what I like. You know what I like? They're doing their thumb up and thumb down thing. It started today at StitchFix.com/enjoy. You get 25% off and keep everything in your fix. That's StitchFix.com/enjoy. 25% off and keep everything in your fix. StitchFix.com/majority. All right, I want to welcome back to the program Dr. Dr. Allen Gary. He's an infectious disease physician and epidemiologist at Access Health Louisiana, host of the daily Noise Filter podcast. Margaret, where are you zooming with us from now?
It's City Hall in New Orleans.
And so the power's back on there?
No, just in City Hall. So City Hall has its own generator. The power was out maybe for a couple hours last night. We were able to fix it, and then obviously the Wi-Fi here as well. That's how it's good to see it. But the rest of the city area is power.
All right, so tell us, just give us a brief rundown of I guess, the past 24 hours, but maybe it's important for us to understand the context prior to that, because this is not just a hurricane situation. This is a real problem in terms of the hospital.
Absolutely, and this is almost this is the perfect storm. It's a convergence of two storms, one little storm and then one viral storm as well. The last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we saw a massive uptick of cases that you guys have been documenting on the show of Delta. The hospitals have been crazy. These are some of the longest days that they've ever worked. These are some of the most sickest patients that they've worked on, or worked with rather. In the hospitals, the COVID units were packed, and I just want to say I let this slip my mind. These nurses are working 12 hours a day in tight suits. I'm there a couple of hours, but they're there 12 hours a day. Feeding. They're true heroes. I just wanted to say that they're true heroes. And big face masks, just amazing what they're doing, inspired by them when they walk in. But we just started to see a downturn. I felt it last week, Wednesday or Thursday. It just wasn't getting as many data concepts that you get COVID. And then showing me the data that supports that. The cases are still going, things are going down, hospitalizations are still going up. But it just felt like it was starting to lessen. And as soon as we were kind of going, oh, thank goodness that's over, then comes hype, and then this was the largest storm that hits Louisiana in recorded memory. We were assuming the day of Katrina, August 29th, was the day that we in all of our friends. And much like 9/11 is for the rest of the country, August 29th for New Orleans is a big day. And I will say that the legacy held up remarkably well, and we've learned our lessons over the course of the last 16 years. For example, I just went out for a drive on my apartment and condo, and also on the cat. and trees down everywhere, but windows were broken. So what I since learned was that prior to Katrina, we usually had gravel. And the gravel captured heat, but that gravel made for projectiles during hurricanes. So that's why there were a lot of broken windows after Katrina. And of course, the roofs were made with nails. There was a lot of flat tires. And because of all these nails that got lifted off the roofs during the storm. So that largely is not here. So the lessons learned from Katrina will certainly apply with respect to levees holding up, building towers, and really reinforcing the levees. But same thing with all the other things I mentioned, rooftops and this sort of stuff. I don't know what's like on the outline outside of the levee system yet. I haven't been able to see the news or look at stuff that mentioned power. So a lot of the places are having a hard time moving out of that large casting as well. Yeah, so then why am I in Hall? My wife is getting staff in the house, so I'm her office right now. But I also work with the health department in many ways. And that's, yesterday I came here to work phones with medical emergencies. And the one thing that we have been phone calls over and over again is what do I do about my oxygen? What do I do about oxygen? Because oxygen tanks and concentrators go up for electricity. So as the power starts to go out all through the city, there's still a major concern of what's going to happen with oxygen. And then, of course, people who are doing dialysis on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, it says on Mondays. So a lot of people who got dialyzed on Friday, who went Saturday, Sunday, but then on Monday, they should be getting dialyzed. And so I'm not really sure what is happening with those folks right now. And Dr. Sue, I'm going to hear off to go work to direct the medical shelter that we're opening up the health departments for this sort of stuff, for oxygenation, for people who may be feeling sick or whatever, so they can see doctors. So that's one headed as soon as I'm going to hear. But it's been pretty intense. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I've gone through many storms. This was category 4, the southernmost part of Louisiana. Yesterday, 3 o'clock, the wind started looking up around 5 when people still go outside, and it was the deepest howling I've ever heard and experienced. It was deep baritone as the winds were pushing through the buildings downtown. You hear this storm coming, and then eventually, obviously, we can see everything that we cover. The whole part is on the 8th floor of City Hall, so I had a perfect foot to sit and watch the most intense storm pass through. Winds 120, 130-mile winds, and the rain obviously is horizontal, obviously flying sideways, and debris flying everywhere, watching things just rip off, and even debris that was going to the 8th floor as well. The winds were blowing so hard that they were pushing the Mississippi River backwards. Just to kind of give you an idea how hard. And today, before I come on this call, I wanted to run to look at a condo, to do the cat, make sure she was okay. It had trees down everywhere. I live on a street in downtown New Orleans, it's full of trees, and trees in the winter book. There's a little bit of structural damage. We're on 6 buildings collapsed a little bit earlier. It could sustain the wind forces. And as of right now, we don't know what we have one confirmed death, but we don't know what that's going to look like. We'll find that we'll learn more as time goes on.
I know that you can see in the data that over the past, like you said, the number of COVID infections dropped, I guess, by 27% over the 14-day change. Hospitalizations are up, but that's a lagging indicator. There was also reports, I guess, over the weekend that prior to that Children's Hospital in New Orleans required a federal surge team support. And to what risk? I know that there was no way to evacuate these patients because all of the hospitals within the region, we're talking about the region of York, government, the south of Texas. There's just no room for COVID patients right now. What's happening in regards to that? Are there people on who are on ventilators that it's problematic for them? What has been going on with that, and what's happening with business in general with COVID down there, particularly with the kids?
Right. So obviously, as we said, that we're seeing. I can't remember the last month we said, and I think I know talked about it. We've seen a shift with this Delta. We have a large number of people in the US. Age of 65 or 78. I can't remember it's exactly in my head. I will age this and didn't sleep very much last night. But we have very high vaccination rates in the elderly. So what we're seeing is COVID is finding that people who aren't vaccinated, and obviously those that are 12 are obviously not vaccinated. And so we are seeing a shift. So in my last couple of weeks, I've seen the children that are mostly 20, 30, 40, very, very healthy, mostly very, very healthy, and mostly 90% unvaccinated. When we are looking specifically at children, as you said, the children's hospital was full. I don't remember anything been full before, and there has been several strikes that have been helping. People's been sending straight teams, they sent the straight team from Hospital where I'm at, or WestJet, but we've been meeting with the doctors, we've been really keeping up. We have a very tight community at WestJet, and so WestJet Hospital, and so we've been working really hard. Obviously, the strike team is doing that at Children's Hospital, such that they were sent. I have not, like I said, I've not heard or seen Children's Hospital before like that before, so it is very, very striking, and again, very, very distressing that people want to be vaccinated, because the best way to protect children is to be vaccinated yourself, and to make sure that when children go into schools and stuff, they're wearing masks as well. But I will say this, that the hospitals are full. So the hospital that I have privileged at is full. We're using areas of the hospital that have never been either used for patient care or specifically cases that have never been intensive care units or where we can COVID units in. And I will say this, that there's a lot of anxiety that I've had was telling people who are calling to me for the oxygen, we do have certain points where people swap out for very small tanks. Very small tanks are only 2 hours over the oxygen. So people, I was trying to even have to PR, and sending people to go to the PR right now, when I know the PRs are full. It's really something that was very stressful for me to do, but I had to guide people to do something, so sending people to go to the hospitals that are already full, people who are already or possibly need oxygen in the first place, and then sending them to the hub where COVID is. So it was very stressful, and it remains to be stressful now. Again, to see that here, I'll have better idea what's happening once I get this another shoulder. I'll have better idea now what's going to
I don't want to hold you too long, because I know you got stuff to do, and I don't want to have you repeat the question.
That's okay. My shit starts and whatever they said whenever I'm done.
So, the biggest danger here, right? I mean, this harkens back to the beginning of the pandemic when we were talking about bending the curve. Because the issue here is there's simply not room in these hospitals to deal with situations like this. What happens when you reach capacity, not just in terms of the physical capacity, but the capacity of a hospital to care for patients, because there's only so many doctors and so many nurses, and you need to sleep too.
Listen, I'll tell you what, every doctor and every nurse that I talk to when we're not talking about patient care and we're just letting our arms down, we're all saying the same thing, that we're getting tired. It's getting very, very tired. It's very, very hard. I mean, I see where the people were saying, well, you have to deny comment, or just kind of go irritated by the fact that people Romans, they take care, they do the right thing, right? Like, if there's a vaccine, you take it, right? That was the people that would assume that people participate in that process, and that's why we're doing this all the people. So I appreciate why they're walking out very heavy. I didn't see myself doing that, but it is kind of very fascinating. This storm that came through, it's just another, just incredibly taxing event. And nerves are going to be great. I'm going to focus on doing the best care possible. To remember, careless or do something that's out of whatever, but and I certainly hope it can happen, but I'm starting to get somewhat concerned about the mental health of our health workers. We were talking about flattening the curve. You look at the curve in the U.S. today, that case is still going way up, right? And you see, when we were talking about bending the flattening the curve, the case movement was a tiny, it was a fraction. It was a flattening the curve. It's great, but you don't hear any of that right now. And what we're seeing is just the blatant disregard and others in the South and prison, right? Highest cases, highest mortality, highest hospitalizations. That's going to change very soon because COVID has been harming all of the people who are vulnerable, and it's just like 50 to 40 states that are having motorcycle rallies that are fully vaccinated. So we're going to start finding places that are in Iowa that's having the major state fair. Moving people in that. As you know, I'm a musician, so some of my musician friends played a show in Iowa, I think, at a festival, which is crazy for me to think about that. They obviously, it's a blatant disregard for what is happening in classic and I know that I talked about this before that you look at the new societies and the peace societies, and you look at the new society, and there's just no, we can't sustain doing what we're doing. The people are constantly just looking for themselves, not looking for the community. And as physicians, as healthcare workers, nurses, or whatever, we can only be here for a certain amount of time. I mean, I'll tell you a story about Panther, who's our chief medical officer of the state. He's a year doctor, and he told the story of a person with a heart attack in that bridge. And they had to go to 6 different hospitals before they were able to get care. And it wasn't because the hospital was full. They are, but with a heart attack, it's overrated as a Chinese muscle. Every minute that passes by, when you hear a heart attack, part of your muscle dies. It wasn't for that. It was because there wasn't enough nurses to take care of the 6 hospitals who didn't have the nursing staff to take care of this individual. So we're finding as a society, we're finding a very, very dangerous thing. Louisiana does not have vaccines. It's only parish drugs. What we're seeing cases are going down in Florida, parish allergic to the fact that we have mask mandate, allergic and we're going to see vaccine mandate starting to kick in as well. But it's largely because of mask mandate, it's largely due to the fact that we have very high vaccination rate, and then also it's the new virus that's very much a risk fast dies from type of virus. So we're going to see it going through the south, and then we're going to start to spawn the seeds and stuff in pockets around the country that are fully vaccinated states. And then it's going to do the same thing. But the rate was just like last year when we had multiple hurricanes, one here from the fall. We're going to see another variant right around the corner if we just don't have the global vaccination rates that we need to have. Until we saw the president was talking about the way he was the trips that would happen, things like what happened, covering on this vaccine that has not moved since then, right? And so until countries, Brazil, India, China, starting to their own vaccines, we're going to beat this conundrum where, okay, so let's say Europe is on, but right around the corner, and Cuba is starting to show evidence of being vaccine invasive. Let's say we should and we will eventually get to it. I call it epsilon. You get no epsilon, and now it's completely vaccinated. What do we do? So these are concerns, especially for think about this as a COVID expert. It's a great concern that here, and then again, like you said, we have the convergence of storms and this powerful storm in the history of Louisiana with a powerful surge that we've seen, and we're only at the beginning. And go back a week or two to see what has inspired from all this. And I said to say this, that thankfully, the flood walls, the levees help out. So there was no flooding people trying to award completely power as an office right now. The air conditioning in this office, there's pockets of electricity around the city hall. We're looking at the right side, the power in the office and air. There's no air function outside right now. It's hot, it's humid, it's typical humid summer day, and air conditioners are usually running. There isn't that. So without power, and I'm going to refer to this as power in Avondale, which is the southwestern part of New Orleans, that just fell right into the roof. And as a result of that, the entire network is completely down. And so we're expected to not have power for, who knows, I hear different people from there. Right now, the press conference, so she's probably getting this information as we speak, but we're expected to not have power for quite some time. And I got in the car to go home, as I mentioned, and as I got in my car, I'm like, well, it was cool, and I realized, right, my wife and I both have a light. So, only have. Now, fortunately, we own our place, so we can walk or ride bikes, so that's fortunate. But the hospital where I worked 10 miles away, so it's 20 miles trip. So eventually those miles are expired in 2014, like so the battery's actually 50 miles charge, so without a charge, obviously. So that's another thing that just occurred to me as I was driving home to live that we both have like
Boa tarde. Era o seguinte, nós já vamos encomendar uma pizza das novas vegan montanha, mas na vossa base sem glúten. É possível fazer isso?
This is ridiculous that our system is so dependent on electricity and power, and that these are not why are we
Não é possível só trocar a massa, ou seja, fazer com a massa já bem preparada, é isso? Sim. Já eu estou a perceber mais ou menos isso. Então, mas então, a massa sem glúten só há essa hipótese de fiambre e queijo? Há duas. Quanto é que é sem glúten? Há individuais ou só em médias? Ok. Ok, então há duas, né? Uma de bacon e uma de pepperoni. Ok, então quero uma de cada, se chegou. Certo. Então é Praceta das Oliveiras. É aqui junto. Sim, Alberto. É perto do. Atrás do continente, perto de. Ok. Número 1, primeiro esquerdo. Certo. Sim.
probably is a function of mandates, probably is a function of.
É só isso. Não, desculpa, eu estou agora a pensar, não pode ser, porque isto tem uma quantidade de casamento, não dá. Por isso é que temos a ideia. É que eu estou a pedir só para eu não estou a pedir para mim, eu estou a pedir para outras pessoas que têm estes problemas. Sim. Pois, eu acho que não vou encomendar. Ok, eu acho que não vai dar para encomendar nada. Mas sim,
I spoke to Dr. Michael Osterholm a while back about masks. He talked about the difference. You got 20 minutes with a cloth mask in a room that is sealed with someone who has COVID. I'm not sure if they're wearing masks or not. And the quality of the mask. Can you just speak a little bit about that dynamic? I've seen videos online where people are trying to argue masks don't mean. You can do the cigarette test. You can see the smoke coming out. But the amount of smoke that comes out and the freeness of it and going in too into that matters as to your ability, right?
Right. It does. And I have
só em. Ok, e o queijo e não, eu estava a pensar nos ingredientes, mas esqueci que eles já vêm com queijo, portanto, tem uma base de queijo. Certo, sim, não, eu percebo isso. O problema é que o queijo, por isso é que a gente tinha uma vegan, porque também temos intolerantes ao lactose aqui, portanto, já vi que não, eu vou ter que pensar, porque já vi que não há nenhuma hipótese de gente. Ou seja, a glúten tem, a que não tem glúten tem queijo e a que não tem queijo tem glúten. Olha, obrigado então. Certo, não há problema nenhum. Certo, era só porque nos expressos que tivesse para trocar a base, mas já percebi. Ok, muito obrigado.
I'm much more, you know, like I remember I think talking to you were saying that two people were sitting in the room and at five, they would talk all day long and they would not get their device. And that's true. But I'm telling you, from personal experience, I see doctors and nurses just walking around hospitals with just
Functional mandates probably is a function of hopefully people like realizing it's all masks. The big thing now is a lot of kids going back to school with masks. Story out of California that details how unvaccinated teacher went in. There's a mask mandate there, but during some class meeting, she didn't use a mask. Front row, kids in the front row, 80% of them got COVID. It diminished the further back they were. But I spoke to Dr. Michael Osterholm a while back about masks. He talked about the difference. You got 20 minutes with a cloth mask in a room that is sealed with someone who has COVID. I'm not sure if they're wearing a mask or not. And the quality of the mask. Can you just speak a little bit about that dynamic? I've seen videos online where people are trying to argue masks don't mean anything. You can do the cigarette test. You can see the smoke coming out. But the amount of smoke that comes out and the freeness of it and going in too into that matters as to your ability to catch COVID, right?
Right, it does, and I have differed. I have a different view of Dr. who I admire greatly. And last summer we had a public kind of back and forth through op-eds, and so and I heard your again, I respect you greatly. I think that he's slightly off with the mask. I heard you quote me several times, and so I appreciate you letting me kind of give you my. I think any facial covering is helpful, and a lot of people like myself get frustrated with Dr. Osterholm because he makes it seem like unless you have an N95, unless you have an N95, you're not protected. Well, to a certain degree, to the letter of the science, he's correct, and I can't argue that point. But he's also not being a scientist, he's a clinical practitioner, and I just wish he just didn't have it as emphatic an approach to it. I'm much more, like I remember I think we were talking to, I think it was or something. If we were saying that two people were sitting in the room with N95s, they would cough all day long and they would not get the virus. And that's true. But I'm telling you, from personal experience, I see doctors and nurses just walking around hospitals with just surgical masks like this, 3-5 surgical masks, and they never got COVID. And they are in people's faces listening to their heart and lungs every day. So I think he's a little emphatic about it, and I see where he's coming from. And he put an op-ed out, I put an op-ed out responding to it. So I see this one. I think this individual covering really does the trick. I think the first time we talked, I was unclear about how much these coverings and where we were with these coverings at that point. I knew that they were going to be helpful, but now I'm sold. I see in the hospital every day. People, I wear an N95 and I cover my N95 with a mask, so I can put on the N95 for as long as I can, basically to the strap race, where I feel too much air coming through it. And then I'll get another one. But when I'm out with community, I just wear the mask, all double mask, and I feel very safe. I know plenty of other doctors that have done that, and they've done very, very well. So, yes, the quality of the mask matters to the letter of the law, yes, but I would say if you
The difference between saying a seatbelt is, without an airbag, it may not be as protective, but it's still protective. And a no seatbelt in like a tank is also going to be protected. Like, I mean, there's degrees, but you don't want to eschew the end type of protection because it's not the maximum protection.
and that's my view for that. And when I heard that interview with David, it was just frustrating for me because I was like, what? Yes, he's right to the letter of the law.
To be clear, that's the difference between public health policy and perhaps a physician who is making an assessment of something, right? I mean,
Let me see if I can rephrase it. He's an epidemiologist of practitioner. So that's what makes me split. If he were like pure hardcore aerosol scientists, of which they do exist, I can understand what he's coming from. But again, he's taking a very approach toward it. And as a public health practitioner, I would hope that. And again, and I listen to his podcast every week, and he really just sticks to the science very, very emphatically. Whereas again, like people like me who are on the front line, who are in the hospitals, and I see my colleagues just walking around with just a 3-ply mask, and they just change it and they leave the hospital. They do fine. They're vaccinated. They're fine. Now, if we're talking unvaccinated, maybe you would know that yet. But I can't say more than anything else. Like it's getting tiring to see that what's happening in these mask wars, to see these flight attendants having to chastise the folks that are flying. It's incredible to see these governors on both sides of the states, Florida on one side and Texas on the other, that are really putting their political career really ahead of public safety. It's nice to see these judges are signing back against them. It's nice to hear the president talk about, well, if you're not going to come to the school district, that will come in and make sure that you get some paid. That's the right thing to do. I agree with that because all of what we're trying to do on the local level is just try to protect their folks. They're protecting the children. Because if you don't do that, we're going to see this virus find as many people who are unvaccinated, and it will affect them. And then ultimately that affects us. So not only does it affect their health, and again, we haven't even said really one about what the long-term effects of COVID are, beyond just what we refer to as long COVID, right? The so-called long hauler syndrome or post-COVID syndrome. We don't know what sort of cardiac effects it have. We don't know what pulmonary effects it have. And the vascular effect, we don't know any of that because we're not out. But we have seen it with people who have survived both, right? We have seen it with other epidemic diseases as well. And just to kind of tribute, there are more outbreaks happening right now in Africa as well as Marburg outbreaks as well. So while we have our own perfect storm, there are other parts of the world that have hemorrhagic diseases as well as COVID circulating as well. So it's time right now, and I wish these governors would just stop putting their own careers ahead of themselves and look to public safety. And I think somebody made a point a year ago or there, but I think to a large degree that you are largely fully falsified. It's like we're trying to see medical licensing boards, state boards are trying to pull licenses away from physicians who are out there making these false statements. And I wish that there was an equivalent for governors and politicians doing that. Of course, that's called voters, but then of course, anytime the election comes around, so much money gets thrown into there that they fool their voters. There is proof in our practice that's being practiced right now by politicians. And I had a reporter once ask me, what can you do? What can you do to stop the misinformation? And I said back to him, what can I do? You're the press. This is your job, right? You're the Constitution. You're the only profession made the Constitution. Your job is to be powerful at check. I'm just one small voice. You know what I'm for. And then he said, you can wave in that wand. What you do? I said, you know what you do? Every night, have 4 or 5 positions, 3, 2, however many you want. Put them on 10 minutes a day. Let's say 10 o'clock every night. You feed us all of this information that was fed that day by politicians, from Facebook, and just give us a half hour to unpair and sort of you can explain how that works. So we don't have that platform, and this information circulates 6 times faster than the information. Because well, it's sexy, it's things that people don't want to click on, whereas scientific paper is scientific paper. Dry, it's not meant to be exciting. So we are subject to disinformation, and that disinformation, without question, driving what we're seeing.
Well, Marco and Barry, thank you so much for your time today. I'd like to catch up with you. We can talk maybe when you're on the other side of this crisis. Talk a little bit about the vaccine efficacy, perhaps, and other issues that we'd like to address. But I really appreciate you taking the time and know you're under a tremendous amount of duress and stress.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with a couple more reactions. With that, let's look at the doctor had mentioned the problems in Louisiana in terms of evacuating patients. They had enough time to be aware of the potential of IDA. I mean, but the problem is they didn't have enough time to go far.
Boa noite. É o seguinte, eu vi que vocês têm agora pelo menos uma opção vegetariana ou vegana. Na minha dúvida é se há alguma opção que seja sem queijo e massa sem glúten. Sim, ok. Obrigado, então. Obrigado, boa tarde.
The human power behind treating all of these COVID patients. I mean, immense exhaustion. Oh, but don't worry, we've got that side of the
So, but the point is, like, people just think capacity, when you hear the shorthand, of, like, there's only so many beds in the ICU, the issue is not literally just the beds.
It's the manpower
You
that
can
needs.
get roll-up mattresses and you can find a gymnasium. The problem is that nurses are trained. Medical equipment exists. We joke about this, but medical equipment was really playing on that business. They were saying, we have these beds available, but we weren't asking the staff. Well, that's the thing. It's that, and I don't know. I can't tell if people are ignorant about this or willfully ignorant, but it is not just, it's not like, well, we're a hotel and we can find a bed. We're just going to cut back a little bit on the service. There's not going to be any room service tonight. No, that's not what happens in treating people.
No, it's something.
Exactly.
But like the thing is, I also think that people just don't want to think about hospitals until they have to think about it. No one wants to think about looking at the blood and sweat of those who treat this kind of deadly disease.
And we also have a situation in this country where we have massive hospital conglomerates who are trying to squeeze every dollar profit they can. We have cutbacks on public hospitals. They want no slack. And so instead of having proper staffs for hospitals as is, they always understaff by 10-15% because that's their profit margin. You see it with the nurses and state pensions up in Worcester, but you see it all across the country. And no slack in the system. In fact, the opposite of no slack. I should say the opposite of slack. There's always going to be a slack. We're always going to run this, with 100% capacity with 95% of what we need, or 92% of what we need, and that's where our profit comes from. And
what do you know? It calls them back to the
here is John Bell Edwards on CNN Sunday talking about that dynamic of there's nowhere for us to evacuate. We had 4 hurricanes last year during COVID. We had a small fraction of the individual hospitals that the country had. We had nothing in the hospital today, 450 with COVID, and we had a range from before this necessary. And you look in the other hand, we didn't have about 300 hospitals. So evacuating the hospital is not going to be possible. Because the people that are doing those patients too, there's no excess capacity anywhere else in the state or outside the state. And so we're really power outages. And speaking of the prolonged power outages, you heard Mark Allen Gary talk about the sort of the material implications of this. And he said, right now I'm in City Hall, we could have renewable energy. We could have solar panels on our hospitals, and that would provide power in this type of situation. An entire city without power. You've got people on dialysis, you've got people on oxygen, and we are right on the verge of a crisis with these people. And simultaneously, we have a big infrastructure bill, multiple ones, in Congress, and these issues are connected. And he, credit where credit's due, Bill Cassidy, Republican senator from Louisiana, making this point on CNBC. Again, 50 billion is in there for resiliency, 65 billion in there to harden the grid, things that certainly would help here. And so, where Republicans are, I don't know yet. But I'm sure, Republicans look around my state, see this candidate, and say, if there's money for resiliency, money to harden the grid, money to help sewer and water, then maybe this is something we should be for. Exactly.
Because the poorest are going to be the people that bear the brunt of what happens in Louisiana and what happens in the effects of climate change. There is a direct line that can be drawn to climate change, which is capital and the reconciliation package, with zero Republicans will ever vote for, to churning out these tropical storms and intense storms and hurricanes because it's a lot warmer in the Gulf than it's been in years, specifically this summer. And so that's part of what we're seeing here. And you know that warming being a little bit abnormal, it's going to be very normal in the coming years. And we better, one, have the hard infrastructure to deal with it, like Cassidy says there, but that's not all we need to tackle the root cause of this, which is climate change.
And so I did some research by the Democrats of their bill suggests that it will cut our carbon emissions by 45% by 2030. Now, none of this is locked in yet. And we're seeing this also on the expansion of the Medicare side, where you've got big, not just insurers who are worried about losing the profits from Medicare Advantage when it comes to dental and vision and whatnot, but also the providers. This isn't even sure, but it goes under the radar, but it is the providers who I think are the biggest opponents to expansions of Medicare, whether it's Medicare for all or Medicare for more at this point, because they don't want their rates cut. The same reasons why they are fighting against the expansion of Medicare is also why we know is the most efficient way to deliver healthcare, or at least the healthcare payments, because they know they're going to get less money because the buyer of healthcare, the payer of healthcare, the single payer, is going to be savvy enough to know how much they should be paying for each procedure, what the efficacy of these procedures are, et cetera, et cetera. And so the very fact that there is this type of lobby for medical providers, again, for medical providers against Medicare, is exactly the same reason why we, as people who need medicine, need healthcare, should be supportive of it. But we'll talk more about that in the coming days. We want to say goodbye to our viewers who are watching this on Peacock. Goodbye, Peacock viewers. We'll see you tomorrow. No, actually, I like that. That was good.
We handed it off.
Finished their introduction sentence. And hello to. All right.
And who will be welcoming in that snip? Welcome to the ultimate YouTube audience. Welcome to the religious audience. I almost fell out of my chair earlier.
We're going to head into fun now. I'm going to go through the story about this CDC report in California. About the story of the teacher. And she must it's unbelievable. Okay.
Sorry.
You're a tough time.
I tried to fix my mic and tried to sit back down the chair earlier and it fell down. A lot of things going on. Anyway.
I mean, I probably.
Yeah, this being recorded, right?
It's good to be interrupted. Exactly.
I was trying to play it off and Sam drew attention to it.
You almost fell off the chair.
That wasn't on camera.
Well, I had that. I'm not saying people were like, "What is this?" I mean, you pay attention. I'm not like having that. Folks, just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member of JordanJoyWithCoach.com. When you do, you support the free show, and you get the extra content, and you keep the show chugging on. Also, our email is exploding. Well, we get a file a report on the explosion, and you can sign up for the AMP newsletter every morning in your email box, as it were, at Jordy.fm. Scroll down to the bottom, put your email in there. We will never sell your email to anybody. And, I don't know what to do, but check it out. The AIM Bricky. Also, check out our Discord, enjoydiscord.com, and justcoffee.coop, or take coffee, tea, or chocolate, and keep it on the majority of 3% off. Just some little teasers of this week. Ooh. So on Friday, and not clear whether I'm going to do this at the beginning of the show or at the point after the switch.
It's gotta be the whole show.
Well, there's no, but I think what I'm trying to figure out is this. It's going to be sunset. And listener Ronald Reagan has very graciously donated the Signs Out, Guns Out shirt. Yeah, I think he sent it probably years ago. But the one that I'm probably going to go with, I'm not going to say that. People will like it.
You have to thank Ronald Reagan for the other book.
Oh, yes, yeah. Ronald Reagan's sent me the People magazine back there with J-Lo and
Finding love again.
But here's the thing. I want to figure out a way, and I haven't been able to sort of figure it out, like, how do you use the Suns Out, Guns Out to raise funds for Afghan refugees? Because I don't know how we would do that. Like, I want to put out like part of my funds.
It seems like you're kind of putting the obstacle in the way.
No, I'm going to do it. I just want to figure out like what's the best way to head. Maybe we just say like it comes out, guns out.
Right, just show your appreciation for the drums.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I'll do like a muscle class. For each
every
$100.
Yes, that's actually, that's a good idea.
Not working.
Well, I mean,
I feel like I'll go over the screen and muscle.
right, flexing.
Yeah, I haven't done that in 15 years. So, also, we received a gift. I'm not more about it, but it's I had an open it, and we'll probably open it on air and somehow. Fortunately, and a hint of what it looks like, but we'll do that later in the week. Matt, what's happening? We need Matt Leckman, media for a picture of Westbrook history reels from David, James Buddy, Robert Pearson, and I talked briefly about Ralph's experience with Hollywood film sets, and how it's not actually Congress, and he's often, it's very new that industry, but it's also freelance, so it's and then we got to fun stuff that we talking about radio free Tom. You know Tom Nicholas? Like, isn't he like on Twitter? He's super like Democrat. I think he's like he criticized what he was but I don't think he's a Democrat. Well, that's what it is. It's kind of a Republican, but he's been so anyway, you have to talk about yourself first because I questioned why you're okay. I'm fine. Actually, we talked about this stuff in the context of resources, where he was saying actually, this class, we can go over the joking that he was stay there just fine. Anyway, so that's all the good figure that most folks We've been waiting 5 years to address that? Well, no, we got a couple of days, because Tom Nichols is saying that Afghanistan is all college. Even though he's quoted 20 years ago saying, oh, he's part of a great community. And also, these are all of our, like everybody, for us Americans, that we really look at ourselves. We kind of we're Afghanistan.
Like in terms of not sufficiently supporting the war.
Yeah, exactly. And we're putting military in the spot, like in the
well, like, he's not having what
criticism is wrong. We shouldn't have been there in the first place.
No, but he's saying the American people, not the power.
Exactly.
Like, it's a step away from your two books.
It's not a good
Afghanistan.
Yeah, and also, and the other New York, he's saying that, it's he says that nostalgia isn't real because he is switched on like the New York inspiring people, that the Universal factory, play factory, was like he's not using that too, but it's like, he knows the way he's decided to do that, so of yours, your experience at one factory when you were 19 does not actually,
You saw the
compute all of the data that's compiled by,
In fact, it's like, if anything, it says that you saw the startup this process that pairs the book with it.
that's,
But he's a guy who does look about how like experts should be approached with everything. He's a good technical guy.
and then how do you then make an argument that experts should be in charge of everything? But my personal experience at my job when I was 19 is more relevant than the data that's compiled by experts.
Yeah. And we really can talk about that. It's like people are such nostalgia. It's very comfortable. It's very,
That's bizarre. That's bizarre. But all right, that sounds interesting. I'm getting out. I have $500 in good Don't forget, check out Nobody's show, youtube.com/show, and see you in the funhouse, 606-257-3920. 606-257-3920. See you in the We are back. Fun out on the majority report, apparently.
No longer.
Well,
I'm not taking it well.
yeah, people are still referring to it that way. So,
Well, I mean, there will always be supporters of energy, but it doesn't necessarily have the closest to That's my food.
Yeah, that is said like someone who is trying to make a little bit of a company.
Yeah, this is the restoration.
Yeah. But you can stand down with special threats. There was no reason I'm not going to the coup.
Well, I mean,
That's the way that people.
yours is backed by the U.S. government, the Democratic Party, and of course Peacock. I don't have the necessary funding.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I've got a lot of the beacon, of course, you see it. Yeah.
Send us an email.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sam, you're hopelessly mediocre. Can't believe you bothered to show your old catcher's mitt of a face on the show again after Emma outclassed you so hard day after day. You look like a 7-year-old who had a G drink with one wish, and that wish was to be accepted to Marion Mole, who lives off Skittles, Adderall, and smugness. I mean, seriously, what a douche. I can almost see the Axe body spray wafting off of you. And are people supposed to look better after a vacation? You look like you got was being family monkeys when extruded from a half-broken pasta machine. I'm only allowing this gigantic size iron because it's been a week and a week. Anyway, I love the show. I wanted to point out on the subject of Matt Taibbi that you say you haven't heard him make any noteworthy points of late, yet you have to pronounce the letters Setember